Hello from Washington and from eSchool News TV. I'm Bob Jacobson. We're here at the national headquarters of Cable in the Classroom, known as CIC, and the sponsor of annual awards for some of the nation's most creative thinkers in education and technology. We're here with Scott McLeod, one of the award recipients of the Cable in the Classroom program. Scott is an assistant professor of educational administration at the University of Minnesota and has created a program to help develop leaders in educational technology. And thanks for joining us, Scott, at eSchool News TV. I understand that you've built a castle. Can you tell us about that?
Yes. CASTLE stands for the UCA Center for the Advanced Study of Technology, Leadership, and Education. We are the first center in the country that's dedicated to the technology needs of school administrators as opposed to teachers or students. One of the things we find with K-12 technology efforts is that there's been a lot of attention paid to the needs of students, to the needs of teachers through grants and training programs and professional development, et cetera. But we haven't really invested much in the leadership that's necessary to make all this stuff happen.
What is it about leadership in education and tech-savvy leadership that you're concerned about?
I think what we're seeing across the country is that we get teachers fired up with technology. They can become very skilled, they're very talented at integrating technology into the classroom. They get excited, they want to do more. The students, of course, are living and breathing it. But then they run into these school systems and school structures that turn out to be barriers to effective use. So we essentially have leadership across the country that hasn't had much training. They don't have much knowledge. They didn't grow up with this stuff. And so they don't know how to effectively support it. They don't know how to effectively facilitate it. So when these enterprising, energetic teachers try to do things, they run smack into the brick wall of their administrators' lack of knowledge and lack of understanding. Administrators are the ones that have the power to facilitate change. They control the power of the budget, they assign personnel, they create vision, and yet we're not doing a lot of those things in the areas of technology because our leadership doesn't know how to be effective leaders in the area of technology. They might be very skilled leaders in other areas of education, but they're struggling when it comes to the tech stuff.
So do you see the administration here evolving into a different pattern where people who are expert in educational technology are also leading their institutions?
That's an interesting question. I think we sort of see two things happening in schools. We have formal leaders, principals, superintendents, central office folks, who have been trained through the traditional educational administration path. They rarely know much about technology. Then we have district technology leaders or building technology leaders who are in more informal positions of authority. They're district tech coordinators, technology integrationists. They might be a CTO in a larger district. They know the technology inside and out, but they don't have any leadership training. And those two don't intersect very often. So the leaders, the formal leaders, will delegate authority to the tech people because they don't understand it. But the tech people who are then put into leadership positions don't have any leadership training or knowledge to be effective leaders. They just know the tech base.
Right. Well, what would be an example of the disconnect, if that's the right word, between educational administration and the school's need for some form of technology in the classroom and so on?
I'll give you an example that I ran across recently. One of the projects we're doing for CASTLE is we're creating free blogs for any principal who wants to try one and see what power they might get out of that. But I had a principal email me after we set up his blog and said, my district technology coordinator won't let me have one. Right. And, and I was so struck by that because I said, isn't the district technology support person supposed to be working for the principal and supporting the principal, not getting in the way of what the principal is trying to do educationally? The principal can articulate very clear educational reasons and communication reasons why that blog is important to his school and his school community, and yet the superintendent and the central office is letting the district tech coordinator overrule the principal rather than figuring out how to make it work. Mm-hmm.
And what would be the profile of your ideal candidate for the CASTLE program?
As a student?
As a student.
Oh, we actually take students from all walks of education. So we define leadership very broadly. So obviously we want as many principals and superintendents and central office people coming through there as possible, but we have media specialists, teachers, technology integrationists, because depending on the district and the situation and the school, often it's your enterprising teacher who's the de facto tech leader. And what we're trying to do is ramp up their leadership skills so they can facilitate change at larger levels and know how to adequately support it.
Well, when you speak to school administrators who may not be up to speed on some of this, what is your advice? How can they replicate in some way the kind of thing that you're doing?
Right. Well, I think the first thing is to have a vision of where we're trying to go. I think that those of us who are in the ed tech world, we have a much stronger vision of sort of what a 21st century school might look like in terms of the kind of skills and knowledge that kids are acquiring and working on, the kind of activities that they're doing. It's a much more hands-on, problem-solving oriented curriculum utilizing modern technologies. So, we know that the future is going to be technology suffused and globally interconnected, and yet our schools aren't really preparing kids to do that. One of the biggest problems we see in K-12 is that our support structures for technology are greatly inferior to what we're seeing in, say, the corporate sector.
That's a question of funding, pretty much, isn't it?
Absolutely, yes. Well, and also the vision to know that a technician to computer ratio of 1 to 400 is not appropriate.
And are schools of education on your radar screen for some sort of integration between what Castle is trying to do and what the general curriculum is in education?
Yes, we're trying. There are about 500 educational administration programs across the country. Very few ed admin faculty really understand this technology stuff either. We started a post-secondary partnership program, which we call P3, which basically took our graduate curriculum, which is the first program in the country based on the National Ed Tech Standards for Administrators, and we gave it away to 15 other universities. So we're trying to plant some seeds in other parts of the country. So now we have a network of about 16 institutions that are trying to do a better job of integrating technological aspects into their leadership preparation practices.
You seem to feel that both the facilities in education and the leadership in education need some upgrading or improvement. But with technology evolving as quickly as it is, are we going to be able to keep up?
Right. I don't know if we're ever going to be able to keep up, but it seems to me that on that curve of staying current, we at least try to move closer to the front edge than where we are now. Maybe it's just through some targeted pilot projects within school organizations where we test out some of these new technologies and see whether or not they hold promise educationally or whether they're going to fizzle out in a year or two. But we need to have mechanisms like we do personally and like we do in other institutions where we're a little more on the leading edge and have ways for moving in those directions when we see that the future is quite clear. So, one of the biggest instances of that, I think, is that we're all going to look back in 10, 12 years and say, wasn't it silly that we argued over whether or not every kid should have a computing device every day? It's as David Werlick says, it's the pen and paper of our time, and yet we're still trying to figure out whether or not kids should have access to it on a regular basis. I'm in favor of more ubiquitous computing initiatives, particularly for kids who don't have access to the technology at home. It's very clear that you're going to have to be quite proficient with digital technologies to be a successful worker and citizen in the 21st century. And so we've got this group of kids who already are disadvantaged, and now we're widening that gap because we're basically foreclosing any opportunity they have for being effective participants in the digital economy because they don't have access to what they need.
The program you're involved with is about a couple of years old at this point. What so far has been the greatest challenge that you've had there?
Getting the word out to pay attention to the needs of leaders. If leaders get this stuff, they have the ability to marshal the resources and create the vision and, sell their communities and acquire whatever funding and staffing supports they need to make it happen. But they've got to understand this stuff better than they do now so that they see where they're going. So the biggest challenge for me is just getting the word out about the need to pay greater attention to the leadership. Change. Long-term substantive change rarely bubbles up from the bottom. We've got to get the people who are in charge of everything to understand what this stuff is and why we need to go there and how to get there.